Welcome, everybody, to the Employ the Exceptional webinar. My name is Melissa Doyle, and I'm very thrilled to be your moderator for the evening. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, which in Sydney are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and extend that respect to the traditional custodians of all of the lands upon which you may be dialing in from, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Now, this webinar tonight is being recorded and it is produced by Guardian Labs and paid for by the Australian Government's Department of Veterans Affairs. So to start this evening, we have a message from Minister for Veterans Affairs, Matt Keogh.
Hello, and thanks for joining this Veteran Employment webinar. I'm sorry I can't join you today, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to share with you the benefits of employing veterans, no matter the industry. Now, maybe I'm biased, but I do believe when it comes to gaining the skills for success, there's no better training ground than the Australian Defence Force. The experience of service are unique. They're unlike anything else in the civilian world. As a result, Aussie veterans leave service with skills that can be hard to find. Leadership, the ability to respond quickly to change, a willingness to pitch in and do the hard yards, and a desire to work as part of a team. But maybe most importantly, veterans possess a strong work ethic and hold themselves to a high standard. These qualities are always valued in the civilian workplace, no matter the industry. And today is all about throwing a spotlight on these transferable skills and looking at how they can be applied to different industries. Today's speakers will motivate you to consider veterans as a highly skilled source of talent that can benefit your organisation. This webinar is part of the government's $24 million veteran employment program. The program aims to improve veteran employment opportunities and help organisations, like yours, to benefit from the diverse skills veterans bring. This webinar will demonstrate what can be achieved when employers commit to veteran employment. I encourage everyone here today to register to join the Veteran Employment Commitment. Not only does it offer companies guidance on how to implement and enhance veteran employment initiatives in your workplace, but it also demonstrates to veterans that your organisation values their experience and actively supports recruitment and retention of veterans. So after today, I hope when you next see an application from someone with ADF experience, you'll know this means they are dedicated, resilient and hardworking. Thank you for your participation, and I hope you enjoy the session to explore how ex-service people can be assets in your organisation.
Well, Minister, thank you very much. And as he said, ex-service personnel, their experiences are unique. So let's explore that this evening. I am joined by a panel of experts to discuss the value ex-service people can bring to the workforce, whether it be leadership skills, problem solving, communication, or a strong work ethic. Those who have served in the Australian Defence Force possess many of the key skills and attributes that organisations need to thrive in 2024. And yet many moving into the civilian workforce don't actually consider their skills applicable. They don't understand that the technical skills gained while serving can actually set them apart. So if you are an employer, a decision maker, a recruiter, or maybe an HR specialist, then get ready to start taking notes, because this conversation will help you to understand how you can employ the exceptional within your workforce. If you do have any questions for us, there is a live Q&A feed on Zoom, so just pop them in there and we'll do our best to get through as many as possible in the time that we have. And if you submitted a question at registration, same, I'll be sure to do my best to ask that as the conversation unfolds. So let's meet our panel. Tonight, joining us, Tom Newen, an Australian Army artillery officer turned freelance management consultant. Tom, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good evening.
Rochelle Towart is a proud Wonnarua woman. She's recognised nationally in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership, governance and education, and has elevated the importance of Indigenous leadership and governance capacity to the national stage. She is the Managing Director of Pipeline Talent. Rochelle, hi.
Hi, Mel.
Kelly Kavanagh, who served in the Royal Australian Navy for almost a decade and now works at naval shipbuilding firm Navantia Australia, a veteran employer of choice. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks for having me, Mel.
I look forward to chatting. And Michael Lorrigan, Defence Liaison at the veteran-owned organisation Disaster Relief Australia, who have also been recognised as a veteran employer of choice. So, Michael, welcome to you and welcome to all of our panel.
Thank you.
Now, I've got a lot of questions to get through. We really appreciate your insights tonight. So I will begin, Tom. I want to ask you a little bit about your experiences. So you went from university to the public service, then onto the military, then you did an MBA and you entered corporate life. So from your experiences, how much of a benefit do you think there was in being in the Defence Force for your career now?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. It's been quite a significant benefit. So, I was a public servant, and as a public servant moving into the private sector, there are questions about, am I up for a challenge? Am I resilient? Have I dealt with great stress before? Which I think are the sort of questions the private sector would have about a public servant. And being able to say that I'd spent a number of years in the army really helped take those questions away immediately. So it was great from a branding perspective, but I think there was a reality behind that brand as well. So time in the army really did accelerate my professional maturity, and it built a level of confidence and a toolkit for problem solving and structured communication, which has put me in good stead to this day.
You sound really positive and proactive about it, that you were really able to recognize those skills. So I'll ask you a little bit later on about some of them, because I think that's one of the main things that we can take away, isn't it? Is the tips that you have to offer to everyone so that they can think along the same path. Rochelle, one of the things that I'm fascinated to talk to you about is in your recruiting and appointing Indigenous talent to leadership roles, you provide a layer of care and support. And I know that's not the norm for recruiters. So why do you do it? And do you think maybe some similar measures could be employed for ex-service people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think recruitment isn't just about placing.
I think we've got Rochelle as frozen. I think we'll try and come back in 1 second. She is there, but obviously this is live TV, isn't it? Technology. So anyway, I'll come back to Rochelle with that question very shortly. Michael, one of the things I want to talk to you about, Disaster Relief Australia, we all know about it. It is quite extraordinary. You work with a lot of ex-service people. Do you think they're aware of just how valuable their skill set is to civilian industries? How do we encourage them to recognise that?
I get asked this question a lot, and it really depends on the individual. We've got individuals who generally leave the Defence Force under certain conditions, such as a medical discharge and things like that, can be forced into that civilian sector and really have no understanding of the direction in which they travel or they're traveling. So their transferable skills at that time is not something that's at the forefront of their mind. It's more about looking for what's next. But in saying that, those who have transitioned through defence in a more traditional way, so just honourably discharging, generally they're given their transition courses and things like that to really progress them into the civilian sector.
So maybe support a little bit is the key, which Rochelle, looks like you're back with us. I'll ask you, but this is what you've done within your field. Just give me a nod, Rochelle. I know that, no, it looks like she's very still there. So no, I'll try and come back. No, you're back now. You're back. We were talking about the support that you provide, Rochelle, and if that's something that maybe all recruiters could look at doing.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we understand recruitment isn't just about putting a candidate in a job. It's about ensuring that they feel supported throughout their whole career, and that importance of care and career approach in everything that you do, because it's not about just getting somebody into a job. It's about supporting them to move onwards and upwards, and it's about prioritizing the care, because moving from one job to another is a scary thing. We don't do it often. And it's important, particularly in leadership roles. People think that because you're up there that you've got it all together, but really you don't. And to have people, whether it's coaching, whether it's ongoing check-ins with people, whether it's making sure that we, extend, you can extend the model of care to every diversity pillar, because it's about people, and you've got to care for people, and it's as simple as that.
I think we should extend it to every single pillar, full stop. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kelly, the importance of a veteran's life experience and while they were serving. I mean, a lot of the skills that we're talking about this evening are really hard to translate onto a CV. You know, how do you list some of the skills that ex-service personnel have and have picked up? So, you know, what's your view? What are some of the ways they can go about doing that?
I think it can be quite difficult, especially if they may never have previously developed a CV or applied for a job from the whole time in service until they've fallen out of for various reasons, and they're applying for roles. So it can be quite hard for them to get down on paper and translate their skills. But I think from an employer perspective, if you're aware of that, you can take a lot of measures for it. And we have, that's probably one of the main reasons we value a lot of veterans, is we have some brilliant design engineers working for us, but they all follow quite a similar, like, traditional pathway. They'll go to school, high school, uni, do an undergrad, maybe do a master's, fall into a graduate engineering role. And it's quite a similar sort of role that they take. And they design some brilliant equipment, but they've never used it. So generally, the veterans to us are bringing the human factor. They actually have experience operating it, maintaining it, and actually using the end equipment of that we design and support, and not in like a sterile environment designed within an office. They've been like a homesick, frightened 19-year-old late at night using this and like panicking, and that's kind of that experience is what they bring to us, to our company anyway. But I think quite often they do sometimes need that extra assistance of how do they translate all that they've done onto paper, especially when they don't often see what they've done as being exceptional because all of their peers around them have done that. So they just assume that, no, everybody does this because all they've experienced, everyone can do that. But they don't realize that it's actually quite rare, the skills that they have.
That's a really good point when you're surrounded by greatness. I see what you're saying. Michael, can you give us some examples of employment opportunities at disaster relief and maybe other key sectors such as trades, health, risk management?
Look, I could speak for employment at Disaster Relief Australia, no problem. We've at the moment got around about 4,500 volunteers. Our paid employee, 60% of them are made up by veterans or veteran family members. And that stems all the way down from our CEO, COO, all the way down to our operations and logistics roles. But for veterans in a volunteering space, which is what we really try to concentrate on, there's opportunities across the country. We've got 10 disaster relief teams spread out across the entire nation, in most of the capital cities and most of the large rural centres. And volunteers in those areas or veterans that volunteer in those areas can really assist the community in all the disaster recovery operations that no doubt will start to occur again as we come into that disaster season.
One of the things when I was reading up, Michael, some of the notes that I had, you talk about finding your purpose. And I guess when you talk about Disaster Relief Australia, I mean, it's an exceptional contribution to our country. We're talking ex-service personnel who are giving, who have given. So do you think that's a really important thing, to find your strength, to find your purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a stigma in the media and across the country that veterans have PTSD or all veterans have PTSD, and that this leads them down certain pathways, but it's absolutely not true. Veterans are valuable and they're not vulnerable. The purpose that you find through volunteering is what's driven me to be a member of Disaster Relief Australia. And I can speak for most veterans who get out of the Defence Force. One of the worst parts about leaving all of your mates behind and your day-to-day activities that you really don't have to think about is then trying to find your purpose moving forward. And purpose through volunteering, you regain that innate service feeling that you got well-being in defence. And it's that unique individual who joins defence to begin with that then goes on to volunteer, and that purpose through service is really important.
Tom, in your experience, which skills do you think honed while serving have proved to be particularly helpful for you working in the civilian world?
Well, Mel, as a management consultant, the bread and butter of my job is to analyze situations and develop courses of action. So, with that in mind, there's three things that come to mind. First is that the military has specific processes for analyzing situations and developing courses of action. So, having had experience of doing that the military way has really brought a level of richness and color to the way that I do it in the business world. And it differentiates the way that I do it compared to the standard, let's say, business school graduate who's only learnt that way of doing things. The second thing is that in the defense world, very quickly in your career, when you're very junior, you're forced to spread your time between time on the ground, being a frontline manager, but also time in the headquarters where you get a big, broad view of the big picture. And that dual lens and ability to appreciate both sort of the high level numbers, but what those numbers mean on the ground as well, has meant that my recommendations aren't just theoretically valid, but they're practical and applicable on the ground. And then the final piece I'd say is people leadership and the ability to motivate people. So the sort of people leadership training that you get and your need to prove that in defense is unlike anything that you experience in the corporate sector.
Leadership, I think, is something that's really coming out in this conversation. That word keeps coming back to me. Can you elaborate on the leadership training, Tom, that you undertook in the ADF and how it differs from your MBA and your corporate experiences?
Sure. So if I start with my corporate leadership training, I've been lucky enough to work for great companies that are famous for investing a lot into their people, and so I've experienced some of the best corporate training that money can buy. And it's very often it's positioned as a reward once you've been promoted or once you've performed well, and it's maybe a week retreat with a lot of reflection and thought into what leadership means. And there might be a bit of role playing and there might be a bit of journaling and book work that follows thereafter. And it is quite valuable. But if I compare that to the sort of leadership you get in the ADF, or sorry, leadership training you get in the ADF, it's something more like you get a framework for understanding and talking about leadership, then you've got to prove your ability to apply that in conditions where all your colleagues are sleep deprived, food deprived, haven't had a shower for 2 weeks, grumpy, and you're in the same state. So you've really got to prove your ability to lead under the most strenuous conditions. And these are pass fail courses where if you don't sort of meet the bar, you don't get to the next phase in your career. Whereas in the corporate sector, it's more like you'll get out of it what you put into it, but it's more like a reward rather than a testing ground. So it's quite different in that respect.
Can I add to that, Tom, there, where I think an understated leadership tenet that you learn in the ADF is actually followership. And, followership is a form of leadership, in my opinion. And whilst being in the ADF, I think that followership is really ingrained into all of the individuals about supporting their team up and down the chain.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Michael.
Yeah, and Rochelle, I noticed you nodding as well and smiling. And how do we tap into this? How do we support both employers and employees to see the value in this?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I would add to that. Most people that I work with, the reason that we don't have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the numbers that we should have across middle, senior and executive roles across the country is that they haven't been given this thing called real feedback about their ability in a job. So if they're not great at policy, let them know that they're not great at policy. There's nothing that's contentious about it. But because most people don't get the experience and the exposure to leadership training, like at the ADF, it's normally you're a high performer and then somebody goes, and here's some staff to manage, and guess what? They don't do it very well. So we need to get some more people leadership training into the realm. But for me, I get phone calls every day saying, come and, we've got a job. Can you recruit for us? And I go, well, what would make a person want to come and work for you? And they all go, we're great to work with. And I go, what makes you different to the last person that just said exactly the same thing? So for all employers, it's really important to unpack what is the value proposition of your business, what's going to make you a first choice employer. For me, it's for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but what makes you a first choice employer for ex-service people? Because if you think about, for me, I know the statistics on Seek, there might be 20 to 30,000 jobs every Monday on Seek alone for somebody to put up their hand to say, come and work for us. And what I want people to think about is becoming not just an employer of choice, but an employer of first choice, because there's a big difference in choices. And so what makes you stand out from the crowd?
Maybe I'll ask Kelly, what makes you stand out from the crowd?
For us, I think as an employer, you have to get out there. You have to do a lot of networking. You have to get your name out there, your brand out there. Tell people, especially veterans, what you do, and not only what you want from them, but what can you provide to them. And that often means networking events or aligning with VSOs and other things like that. But I think you have to make yourself an attractive place that people want to work, especially within defence industry. It's a very competitive industry, and there is a finite talent pool that we're all trying to pick from. So you basically need to make sure that you are the most attractive option that you can offer them. And it's not even necessarily about pay or conditions or those like usual tangible things, but can you provide them that environment they want, that sense of camaraderie, and it was touched on before, that sense of family that they really want. And it actually it hit home for me recently. I was at a networking event, and one of the women in my team, she said when she left the army, she felt like she sort of fell out of the army, and she'd sort of was a bit lost, a bit adrift, had lost her family. But then when she joined us, and we've got a reasonably large veteran cohort, she felt like she'd found that family again, that sort of sense of, I guess, like connection or belonging that she loved in the army and sort of had missed in regular jobs since then. So I think you really have to get yourself out there and show how you can provide that sense of like belonging or connection that people are after.
Yeah, clearly the research goes both ways, doesn't it? Finding somewhere that you feel that resonates with you, Rochelle, and also that your values align with theirs.
Yeah, I think it's really important to capture those success stories too. So, because I'm assuming that your mob are like my mob, that if you're doing a good job, everybody's talking about you. And if you're not doing a great job, everybody's talking about you. So the reputational piece as an employer of choice is absolutely key. And even capturing those stories to share on social media, on, that tells the story about, hey, we're doing great work with the veterans and you should come and work for us. I think it's undervalued as a tool to get others to talk about their success, because we're a little bit, that's a bit shame about talking about coming, being how great we are. And the other thing that I would add is that you can't be what you can't see. And so having leaders within organizations that, are ex-service men and women, that so that others can see their success outside of service.
Very good point. I've got a question an audience member has just asked here. If someone asked you to equate your military training to an equivalent in the civilian world, what do you think that might look like? Is it a degree qualification or a TAFE certificate, for example? Maybe Tom, you might be able to answer that.
Well, look, I think that the ADF is so diverse that there will be people who come out with trades that equate to TAFE diplomas. There'll be people who have bachelor's and master's. The one thing I will say is you'd be surprised at the number of people who have master's degrees. So people who reach around the rank of sergeant or warrant officer or sort of captain major in the army, it's very common for them to have master's degrees. as part of their ongoing training. So defense in general is an ongoing learning and education institution. And during peacetime, basically what we're doing is learning and professionally developing onwards. So it's, look, I would say the average major probably has a master's degree. It's not unusual at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Michael, one of the things that I'm fascinated, your work takes teams into some really challenging situations. So I guess asking you then some of the skills and attributes that ex-service people bring to your projects, handling situations in the way that maybe not everyone can.
Yeah. So look, veterans bring that unique skill set, which is, learned from experience through exercise, through deployment, through, significant training exercises. Um, Generally speaking, when you're going in a disaster zone, you're dealing with people who might be having the worst day of their life, floods, flooded houses, cyclones ripping off roofs. There could be injuries and things like that that some of these people have had to deal with. And so having people who go in there with the resilience and the empathy to really engage with these people and understand what they're going through on the worst day of their life, I think that's a skill set, not necessarily unique to veterans, but definitely one that they've picked up, through their service.
Mm. So then another question, Michael, that maybe you can answer. I've got an audience member asking, what are the best find a veteran resources available to potential employers?
Look, there's a number, and I could sit here for the next half an hour and list them all off. But the Veteran Employment Program that DVA and the government have recently raised would be a good place to start. There's a number of others. You've got organisations like your RSL employment programs. You've got things like your Defence Community Organisation who you can speak to that can tailor resumes, tailor pathways. And then you've got a various amount of other ex-service organisations such as Soldier On and Mates for Mates and things like that. And experiences with those organisations vary wildly. And it's no one size fits all for everybody. But definitely my first point would be ask around your local network and find out who the veterans are and if they're looking for work and get them, to pass it on through their network because the veteran community is very tight.
Okay.
Can I just add something to that? You'd be surprised at how effective it is if you are simply advertising your job on LinkedIn or Seek, simply to add to the job ad. We welcome defense veterans, because you'd be surprised at just how many people coming out of defense are impressed and intimidated by the business world and think they might not be the right fit or might not be welcome to join your organization. But simply making a short statement like that will very much differentiate you from other jobs out there.
Yeah, walk the talk. Thank you, Tom. Kelly, can we ask about cultural challenges? Are there any that you can think of that might await ex-service people moving into the civilian workforce? And if so, I'm assuming the answer might be yes, but how employers can then offer support?
Yeah, there definitely is. And I think they go both ways, actually. I think oftentimes you get people, especially when they've freshly transitioned, and you're used to the adage of, if you're not 10 minutes early, 10 minutes late, and you turn up to a meeting, you're ready, you're on time, somebody saunters in 3 minutes late with a coffee in hand, and you're outraged at just the thought that somebody would actually do that, turn up late, coffee in hand. But then you have to realize they haven't had to run laps and laps around an oval for being 2 minutes late to something before. It's part of the kind of the office, culture. It's quite normal. So there are some funny transitions like that you have to learn to accept, I guess. And then, yeah, from the other perspective as well, like as an employer, I think you need to realize that a lot of veterans do strive that sense of camaraderie, like we were talking about earlier, that they have had in other roles. And it's not necessarily always just, a 9 to 5 job for them, but they do have a deeper connection to the work that they're doing. And they often need to be recognized a bit more for that, or appreciate that they do have that connection to the role that is more than just a 9 to 5 job.
So, Tom, then in your experience, how do organizations draw out the best in ex-service personnel?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. The first is that veterans are very much motivated by a meaningful and purposeful mission. So if you can show them that their work is somehow contributing to such a mission, that's really going to energize them. The second thing is perhaps contrary to stereotype, I think defense people are very good at working autonomously. And so if you give them your intent, what resources you're going to give them to realize that intent, the boundaries with which they need to work, then they're going to surprise you with their ingenuity and adaptability. And then the third piece, just a cultural piece, is I think veterans are usually quite humble. They come from a culture that lauds self-service and sacrifice. And so they're not used to tooting their own horns and promoting their own achievements. So, you know, if they are working in an environment where you've really got to kind of self-promote to get ahead, then that's where they could use a bit of assistance.
So then a question to all of you, please let me know who would like to answer this one first. This is from our audience. They're asking how to best brand themselves in the civilian workforce after working in classified environments. How do you protect your identity on public spaces like LinkedIn as you create a new career pathway? Maybe Rochelle.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I think sharing what you can share, and putting yourself out there, rewriting CVs. I think you can use things like ChatGPT now to really be creative in selling a skill set, and how you can use AI tools to really hone in what those skills are. I think there is a way to do it, and whoever's asking the question, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to help you with that CV, because LinkedIn is a scary place if you don't know what you don't know, and how you actually sell yourself. And it's thought. It's really unpacking who you are and finding the right fit, and where you want to work, and even being proactive and going, actually, I want to work for you. How do I get there? And asking people for help, because everybody's going to give you help in this space. It's something that I'm really honoured to help people with their CVs and help them with their career, and think about what is a career vision look like. Because for me, very proudly, I'm 53, can't retire until I'm 65, according. So I've still got a few years left of my my working world, and so people don't think about what is their career vision, and how are they going to get there. And I think it's a really important step to think about career from not just making a profile on LinkedIn, but what is the vision for yourself? Because in a workplace, we think about vision and values and all those sort of things, but we don't think about them for ourselves. And so I would flip that on its head and say, where do you want to go? I always thought as a 14-year-old I wanted to be a hairdresser, and then my aunt made me go and volunteer down the local hairdressing salon, and I lasted until lunchtime because I wasn't sweeping up anybody's hairs. So and here I am now. Who would have thought? Visions can be, and plans can be changed, but I think you've got to start off with a vision for yourself.
I think Melissa is, if I understand the question about moving from a classified role into a potentially non-classified role and how to protect their identity on social media, I think they need to be very, very clear with their communication to their chain of command, and suggest that their identity requires some protection in the form of their social media and how they're portrayed across that company. But I don't necessarily think this panel is the right place to answer that particular question. I think that particular question is a difficult one to answer, and something that needs to be looked into a little bit deeper by that individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Then I do
sorry,
have,
Mel,
yeah.
if I could add that, from a recruiter's point of view, I am absolutely, every day I get phone calls asking me for people who've got security clearances. So you're very much wanted in terms of being a great employee, because it's a really hard, you've got to go through months of clearances to be able to get classification clearances, security clearances, and so you're a very valued potential employee.
Mm-hmm. It's a big asset then on the CV that we are going to form. I've got a question here, and anyone that wants to answer this as well. Do we need to change our recruitment process and get on the phone with people first?
We do. Yeah, I think it's really important to be spoken to have that real interface with anybody that you're working with. We hide behind computers. We don't present anybody to a client who we don't have an eyeballed. And so I think technology allows us to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a particular process and a bit of a dance on how recruiting is done in terms of how you write cover letters, CVs, and network and so on. That if you can just get onto the phone with someone, you kind of bypass all of that and you can sort of understand and probe a little bit further into what someone's experience is, because often there's a translation issue between what relevant skills and experience someone in defense might have and how you express that in the business world. And the best way to break down those barriers really is to actually talk in person rather than try to read a document or a CV or something. So the more we can do that, the better. Absolutely.
Very old school. I love it. I've got a really interesting one here. What is a common trait from companies that do not empower the veteran to succeed?
I would say micromanagement. Micromanagement for a veteran or a ex-service person is a huge issue, in my opinion. They often get empowered in defence to. They're generally given a task and either told what the mission is, or told what the mission is and not how to achieve that mission. So I think most companies who take that away from the individual and take that autonomy away, I really think that's a big issue with empowering that veteran.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that one? No. So then I really like this question. What sort of industries would be a good fit for young people coming out of the ADF who join straight out of school and don't have the master's degree level of experience?
I can definitely answer this one because that basically comprises half of my team at work, especially in the technical sort of space, like operators or maintainers of equipment. They don't necessarily need to have that degree or master's qualification, because what they do have is years and years experience of operating and maintaining the things that we design and support. So they are immeasurably valuable to us. That's what I was talking about earlier, where they really bring like the human factor to what we design. And there's a raft of defense industry companies, a lot of companies that we partner with regularly for work, that are just always screaming for people like this. Especially, I deal mainly in the maritime space, supporting naval platforms, but there's 5 or 6 very large companies that are all desperately after especially ex-serving in general, but especially ex-Navy people. And it doesn't even necessarily matter that much what your role was, your rank or your rate in the Navy. You're still bringing some experience that we can use. Yeah, they're very valuable.
So, Kelly, what then are your tips, though, to other employers that might want to be on this list that you mentioned? You say there's 6, but we want it to be more. I know at Navantia Australia, you've implemented a veteran support program internally. First of all, tell me why that is. But then, any tips you could provide to other employers wanting to do the same?
Yes, we predominantly implemented our kind of veteran support programs because we recognise that veterans they were after that greater sense of camaraderie and connection. You've gone from a job where your colleagues, you eat with them, you sleep alongside them, you're away from home for months and months with them, and that's your normal. And then to go from that to a job where, you might just turn up to the office and do your work and you go home. But they still want that sense of connection with each other. And there's a few things that our program does, but it even extends to groups of people going off and competing in veteran games and things like that. So they still have that challenge and sense of camaraderie with each other. But I think what more companies need to do is get out there and really attend as many networking events as you can. Align yourselves with VSOs, like we were talking about earlier. Align yourself with different recruiting agencies as well, and tell them that you are actively interested in veterans. And then, touching on before too, we're talking about picking up the phone to them. If you get a CV for a candidate that looks even halfway suitable, just bring them in for an interview. It's half an hour of your time, but you get somebody brilliant out of it. But then also, if you're interviewing them and you have a reasonable cohort of veterans already in your organization, why don't you drag one of them in so they can have a chat to them and kind of almost translate what their role was to how it's going to be applicable to your organization. To have somebody talking to them that does understand, what their role was. And yeah.
I think too that's one thing that needs to be stressed here is that for the young individuals leaving the Defence Force that won't come out with degrees, there is a huge amount of opportunities out there. And one of the things that employers look at here is if you can be dragged off the street and taught how to be a soldier or an officer, you can be taught anything. So it's important to stress the trainability. These people have been recruited for a reason because they're trainable. So when they get put into these organizations and into these roles, they can be trained in those positions without a degree.
We have a funny expression about it when we're searching for them. Actually, Michael, it's you bring the will, we'll instill the skill.
Exactly, mate. It's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
when
couldn't
you
agree
guys word
more.
it that way, it makes so much sense. And I see, you talk about they're recruited in the first place. They've obviously got amazing skills. But then I've got a question here saying, but simply why aren't more ex-service people finding easy employment? Tom, they're asking, is it a confidence issue?
I think it's a mix of a confidence issue and a sort of cultural barrier translation issue, right? So I think on the one hand, I talk to business people and they're really impressed by what people in uniform do, right? The sort of stress they go under, the resilience they demonstrate, the sort of work they do that has lives at stake and so on. That's very impressive. On the other hand, you've got people in uniform who look at people in suits and are very impressed and intimidated by them at the same time. So you've got both sides kind of thinking, well, is what I've got to offer good enough for the other side? I've had business people actually ask me, look, I want to employ veterans, but I think my job, well, the job I'm offering is probably going to be too boring to someone who's been to Afghanistan or done this and the other. And they don't understand how exciting what they're offering is to a veteran. At the same time, you've got veterans thinking, well, I don't know anything about business. All I've done is kind of managed multi-million-dollar assets and missions with lives at stake. So what do I know about business? And there's just got to be a bit of work I think, on both sides. So for veterans to learn a bit more the language of business and how their experience translates into business terms. And for business, I mean, if they want the opportunity of being able to hire great talent, to understand just how to translate what they're looking for in military terms. So I'll give you a classic example is I've seen a Royal Signals officer look for communications jobs, but not understand that they are a communications expert, because in the Army, communications is called the Signals Corps. And that's a very simple translation issue, but I think it highlights just how there are completely different terms for very similar things in either sphere.
Do you think, Rochelle, that's experienced by a lot of people across the board in a lot of industries, where it's not until someone points it out to you that you go, oh, yeah, that's my skill set. It's just not worded the same or written the same or on a piece of paper the same that it might be for somebody else?
Absolutely. I think it's very much how, as you say, how it's written for somebody else isn't necessarily how you think you would describe yourself. A couple of the points that I would add, once you've got that employee value proposition worked out for your organization, the next phase that you move into is your employment strategy. So you've got somebody in the business and you want to grow them, you want to keep them, and you want to retain them, you want to see them succeed, you want them to lead. And part of, that's the next piece for people is once you've got them, how are you going to keep them, how are you going to grow them? But again, getting in is the hard part. And it is some of that confidence piece. It is, putting your hand up and having a crack, but you've already done that in your previous world, and now you're just making another move into something else. And I think that if we it is a major career transition, and it is scary, moving from one that you've known for most of your life into something that you're not so confident in. Anybody's going to feel the way you feel, and having that candidate care and having people around you that support you and hold your hand through it is imperative to success, for anybody's success.
And any good teamwork is about supporting your peers, your colleagues to flourish, to be their best self, to be their strongest. And that's obviously what you've learned.
That's what the people leadership is,
Yeah.
having great people leaders around you is where you see success. And where you don't see great people leaders, you don't see great, you see great turnover with staff, and that isn't really a place where you want to work. So, the number one reason that somebody is moving from one job to another at this point in time is purely based on remuneration. That's why we see change, from people putting their hand up going, hey, I need to move from one job to another. But if we don't bring that person back to a value alignment, they're not going to succeed, because they get there and go, what have I done? I've come to a place where they're just throwing money at me and my value doesn't align. So I would encourage everybody to have a look at vision and mission and who are the people leaders, and do your own research on organizations who you're thinking that you'd like to go and work for. And reverse marketing yourself. Don't go and just wait for a job to be advertised. Have a look and say, I want to work for that company, and go and tap and knock and ring, and go and ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. There are two answers in life, a yes and a no. And if you don't ask, you don't know. The answer is always going to be no.
And I just think to myself, oh my gosh, you've got to be so brave to do that. But hey,
you
go into Afghanistan, you can probably do this. So yeah, all right, more power, more power.
More power.
Michael, maybe you can answer this, but I love your line where you said earlier, valuable, not vulnerable. There's a question that's come in that says some employers may be hesitant to employ veterans because of the stigma around mental health and PTSD related issues. Are companies expected to have a support program in place specifically for veterans? Or are there any services that support companies and veterans to navigate these issues?
Yeah, this is a complicated question, and I think it comes with a reasonably complex answer. And that is to say that I think individuals are responsible for their own mental health and mental well-being. And we as veterans do experience a lower level of suicide whilst being in the military, and a significantly higher level of suicide after leaving the military. Now, the reason for that is, debated and being researched, but there are enough organizations out there that give an individual the capacity to take control of their own lives. So should a company have to deal with that as an individual? No, I don't personally believe so. I believe that an individual needs to value add to a company. However, in saying that, veterans do come with some previous history, and that history can be complex, especially if they have deployed to war zones or experienced some of those significant issues in defense. So should they be required to, or should they be forced to have a veteran program for mental health? No, absolutely they shouldn't. However, they should have the capacity to support that individual in the same manner as they would support anyone else.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I might
I was going to add to that,
yeah, please,
Mel, all of us in some way, shape, or form have been impacted by trauma, grief, and loss. And, trauma is something that is very much in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Myself, have huge trauma within my own life. And I think Michael's right. It is our responsibility. But I also believe in that my business, even as a small business of 10 employees, we have our own mental health program. But it's also about healthy work and lifestyle. And there's a whole lot of wraparound supports that I think businesses, as part of their value proposition, they should invest in. Having, just even networks of, we always promote having an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff network so that we can all get together, because there's nothing better than, talking amongst ourselves, and, we are our own best healers.
and it's only going to bring out the best in your people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Supported in
And
however
there is, Melissa, a lot of organisations out there that have been established to support veterans, and some are better than others. You've got Open Arms, you've got DVA, you've got a number of different ex-service organisations, such as your Mates for Mates, your RSL programs, your Soldier On. There are a lot of options out there for individuals to take control of their own lives and then to receive support through those organisations. So yes, veteran programs, veteran mental health programs within organisations are welcome and are amazing for those companies who have the capacity to establish them, have the resources to establish them. But ultimately, I want to stress that it's not the majority of veterans that are having these significant issues. It really isn't. And veterans are exceptionally valuable, and for the most part have taken control of their lives and have already reached out to these organizations to assist them. So although they bring some complex issues on occasions, I wouldn't consider that to be typical.
And probably comes back, I can't remember who it was who said on our panel earlier, but let's have more of the positive storytelling. Let's hear more about the great examples, the success stories, the empowering ones. So yeah, really, really important. Very aware of our time tonight, especially mindful for Rochelle, if I can take a moment to say thanks for joining us, because Rochelle has been nominated for Small Business Leader of the Year at the Women's Agenda Leadership Awards. It's taking place tonight, so good luck. We will all be cheering. We cannot wait to hear how you go. But I guess as a final question to all of you, if I can get, and I think we've touched on a lot of the aspects of this, but maybe just condensing it into one answer each might be a really valuable way to end it. Someone's written in saying, what are the top 5, but you don't have to have the exact number, the top attributes that all veterans bring, regardless of their role? Are there any guaranteed skills that you can attribute to a CV that has Australian Defence Force listed? Maybe I'll start, Tom, I'll start with you.
Look, the first one that comes to mind to me is that you can guarantee they're going to be mission driven. That if you give them an intent that you want to have realized and tell them, do whatever you can to make this reality, they're going to fight tooth and nail to make it a reality. So that will to win and that just level of drive, I think you can take as assumed. The second thing that comes to mind is teamwork. So I think someone in the panel said earlier that it's not just leadership, but it's followership as well. And everyone learns great followership under the most stressful conditions, which means they're going to be, selfless and a great team attribute in whatever team they're going to be. I think those are the two that come to my mind.
I think discipline. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there.
No, go ahead.
Discipline is a huge one. Discipline is instilled from day dot. The first day they march into the Army Recruit Training Centre, discipline is very heavily instilled, and you can almost be guaranteed that any veteran that comes into your organisation is going to have that mindset still.
Any others that you'd like to add to the list, Michael, too, while I have you?
Oh, again, I could go on all day about it, but trainability is one that I really like to push. That ability to adapt really quickly to situations and to be trainable to those individual situations. I think it's something that, again, because of the way the ADF trains their individuals, it's really something that can be taken advantage of in the corporate space.
And you can't teach quick thinking, can you, all the time?
No.
Rochelle.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind is integrity. I think integrity is something that is really undervalued in terms of a value. Mission focused veterans integrity is my word.
I'm scribbling all these down because they're amazing. Discipline, integrity, trainability, integrity, leadership, teamwork, fellowship. They're all really, really vital. Kelly, I'll let you add to the list.
Rochelle and Michael stole my thunder there somewhat, both of them. But absolutely integrity and discipline, and self-discipline, especially. Yeah. But also, I think a lot of it is a curiosity. Like, these are people that quite often at 17, 18, 19 years old signed up to a job and a life, not quite knowing where in the world it would take them. And they had that kind of curious, adventurous, like, yearning to find something more. And I think when that's brought into like a normal workplace, they're constantly striving for improvement, constantly curious about why are we doing things the way we're doing things. And which touches on what Michael was saying before, or was it Tom, that they're very trainable, very teachable, they're very curious, driven people.
I absolutely can't thank you all enough. I think you've really put incredible perspective on the value of ex-service personnel and the skill set that they can bring to an organization. I hope any employers watching tonight can take that from this discussion and maybe look at people through a stronger, a sharper lens. But I also hope any ex-service personnel watching tonight can have a moment to look at their own resume that's in their head, their skill set, the things that they've learnt along the way, and absolutely highlight them and be really, really proud and know that they are of value in so many areas. So you've all been wonderful. So thank you so much, Rochelle, Michael, Tom, Kelly. I appreciate your time. Rochelle, good luck tonight.
Thank you.
I know I wish I could do a big round of applause for all of you, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and thank you for your insights and your wisdom. It's been fabulous talking to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
An extraordinary panel, yeah. And thank you to being our audience. We will be circulating this webinar for catch-up viewing. Should you wish to share it with any of your networks, please do. If you'd like some more information or maybe to join the Veteran Employment Commitment, visit veteransemployment.gov.au. And I've really enjoyed the conversation this evening. It has been so engaging. I hope you've enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the Guardian Labs team and the Department of Veteran Affairs, I wish you all a good night. Thank you.